Okay, guys, I have come to the realization that the absolute pinnacle of human achievement, the best invention that human beings have ever come out with, is IMAX technology and IMAX cameras and IMAX theaters, because that experience is just sublime. Like, I actually can't put my finger on exactly what makes it so elevated beyond anything else, but going to an IMAX theater and watching a movie that was shot in 70 millimeter film on IMAX cameras is glorious. So last night I went and watched Sinners. It re-released in IMAX, and I had to go see it because I missed it when it first came out. And I'd been pretty stoked on it from originally just the trailers and everything. And of course I watched the Ryan Coogler thing talking about all the different technology they used and the different types of film stock. It did not disappoint. Now, obviously, like, the gimmick, like what draws you in, is just the fact that they shot it on IMAX cameras, and that you get this full expanded aspect ratio for certain moments of the film. It's not like it's the only film that's ever been shot on IMAX, but the mixture of the Panavision 70 millimeter with the anamorphic and then the IMAX for like the really beautiful moments where it opens up to that full, almost square field of view is like, the hype is real around that. Like, it actually looks absolutely insane. And so that alone made the film just a super cool experience to see in theaters. Like, and that's the thing, is it's not really, and I'll get into this later, but it's not really like the genre of film that I would just watch like on my computer by myself anyway. It is like this kind of vampire, Halloween sort of horror thing. I think it is elevated beyond that, and the philosophy behind it is deeper, which I'll get into in a second. But just the genre of like the vampire horror kind of deal is just not really my thing. And so really the reason I went and watched it is because of the IMAX experience, and because what I'd seen of it on the internet is just pretty phenomenal. And so that did not disappoint. That was absolutely amazing, just seeing it in theaters. But what I didn't quite realize would be so cool is, aside from just the image quality, the sound in an IMAX theater is just amazing. And to clarify, this isn't the first time I've ever been to an IMAX film, but I haven't been to very many. Earlier this year, my siblings and I went and watched the new How to Train Your Dragon, the live-action one in IMAX, and that was pretty awesome. It was actually on the biggest screen that they have in all of the state of Oregon. I think it was bigger than a regular IMAX screen. It was definitely bigger than the IMAX screen that I went and watched last night, so that was pretty awesome. But this movie, so Ludwig Göransson's score is, I feel like it's been like underrated or something, or maybe people just aren't talking about it, or I'm not seeing it, but that is one of the most beautiful pieces of music, just like as an entire film score, that I've ever experienced. The way that he mixes all sorts of different genres of African music, African American music, just black music in general, is so like, oh, like, I actually can't really handle how amazingly well done that is. There's the one scene that everyone keeps talking about where it's basically like they're playing this blues music, this bluegrass type stuff in their juke joint, and it kind of talks about the spiritual connection between different eras and different time periods and different cultures with like black music. And so it has these different characters playing music from all different time periods, and the way that that is done, especially with the music, especially, like, obviously the camera work I think is what people are talking about the most, because it's kind of done like in a oneer where it never cuts, which is pretty awesome. But the way that the music is just seamlessly blended together, you've got this like electric guitar coming in, and then this hip hop stuff, and the beat, like this like hip hop trap beat starts playing over this like tribal African music and bluegrass music, and it all mixes together. Like, you just, like, there's no way that this should be able to mix together so seamlessly, but it does. And feeling that in the theater, and I say feeling that because it's more than just listening to it, you're feeling every beat, like, oh, it is just an incredible theater experience. Like, that's the sort of music that I would listen to normally, and it's just beautiful sounding, but like, you're not going to be able to get the full experience of listening to that kind of music except in the theater. And so that's what I think is so amazing about watching this in IMAX, that really elevates it beyond just a regular film. And it's making more and more sense to me why these kinds of films are marketed specifically to be watched in theaters and to be watched on the absolute biggest screen possible, right? Kind of like how the Mission Impossible movies were marketed that way, where it's like literally Tom Cruise and Christopher McQuarrie made these movies to be watched in the theaters, right? Sinners is like the epitome of that. It's like Ryan Coogler and everyone else involved made this film to be watched on an IMAX screen, and if you aren't watching it on an IMAX screen, you aren't really fully appreciating the film. And I mentioned this a little bit, but what's really cool is seeing how when the film opens up to the full IMAX ratio, just the difference between that and Panavision 70 is actually pretty profound. Like, IMAX cameras are great and you know that they're amazing, but you don't really realize how much higher quality and how much more amazing they are until you see them compared to literally the top standard in terms of other cameras. Panavision 70mm on anamorphic is pretty much the highest quality, most amazing camera you can get besides an IMAX camera. And so most of the movie is shot in Panavision 70mm, which looks amazing, but when it opens up to IMAX, you can just see like a super obvious clear difference literally in just the detail and the clarity of the shot. The IMAX cameras are just that much better. Apparently it's somewhere like, if you were to convert it to digital, it's somewhere between 12K and 20K in terms of like pixel quality, which is just insane. Like, we have no digital cameras that can compare to that, and just seeing that on such a massive screen, every tiny detail is just on point, is such a cool experience. So anyway, enough ranting about IMAX, because, you know, as much as this film exists as an IMAX movie, it's not like that's the only thing going for it. So I do want to talk a little bit about the movie itself, because I was pretty blown away by the way that the film was created in a lot of aspects, but then there were also plenty of things that like weren't that amazing, that like I wasn't a huge fan of. And so I feel like I have to talk about all of those things to kind of get like a full picture of really how I feel about the film. Going into this discussion like this morning, I'm not really sure how I feel about the film's philosophy and the way that it was put together. So I guess we'll start with the things like the bad, which I don't think there's a ton of like bad things about the movie, but there are definitely some gripes that I had with it. Some of these are just things that you're going to encounter no matter what when it comes to making something that's meant to be a blockbuster. Because something that's important to point out about this movie is that although Ryan Coogler was basically given a blank check and was given the most insane, unrealistic filmmaking deal that's every, you know, creative filmmaker's dream to be able to get from a major studio, although he was pretty much given a blank check, there are still things that a blockbuster movie has to have in it, and those things are just upsetting to me. Like, it's frustrating how modern movies have to have certain elements in order to be like popular, which I think is stupid. One of those things would just be like the sexual content. Like, you know, going into like a vampire kind of story that there's the target audience is going to want that kind of thing. I am not that target audience. I am not a fan of sexual content in movies at all. And so, like, I just thought it was stupid, the sexual content that was put into the film. I mean, to clarify, it wasn't super explicit. There wasn't a bunch of, like, graphic nudity. There wasn't any nudity at all, actually. But just, it's still unnecessary sexual content. Like, some of it kind of has to do with the story, and I understand why it's put in there, but I feel like it's more just genre mongering, where it's like, okay, this is the genre that we're going for, so of course we have to have a few jump scares and thrills, and we also have to have some sexual stuff, because that's just how it works when we're making a vampire movie. So I thought that was kind of dumb. That's not necessarily a knock on the filmmaking. That's just like, okay, like, they're not going to like transgress the bounds of the genre. As creative as the film is, there's still those things where it's like, okay, they're just holding on to what the genre always says you have to have in it. So that was kind of lame. And also, of course, like, it is a vampire movie, so it's going to be super, super bloody and graphic, which it was. That's not something that really bothers me in films. Like, I'm not the sort of person where that's like a turnoff necessarily if there's a reason for it. And I think this film did actually justify itself in the amount of like graphic violence that it had. It's not a Scorsese movie in terms of it being like that deeply philosophical, but, you know, it does have a reason for being violent, and I think there's some really important metaphors there that could be unpacked. So I didn't necessarily have a problem with that, but that's definitely something that would turn a lot of people away, and I'm not sure that I could like recommend this movie to all of my friends, you know, if that's not the sort of thing that you're willing to go through, right? But I mean, you know, that being said, like, it's a rated R movie. It's made for adults, but it doesn't go too far. Like, it's not the sort of movie that you come away from feeling like dirtied, like, oh, this is just terrible, like it was just such a perverse, kind of piece of art. It's definitely not that kind of movie at all. If anything, you actually come away feeling like pretty enriched, which is really kind of an interesting oxymoron, because again, this is a vampire movie, it's a horror movie, so like you kind of shouldn't come away from it feeling that way. But again, I think it's more of like a creative take on that kind of genre, because you definitely, just because of the music and the overall message of the film, you definitely come away feeling more like you've watched something wholesome, which I thought was pretty awesome. I was actually pretty impressed by that, especially by the end of the film. There's this post-credits scene that kind of really redeems a lot of what might be kind of unsatisfying about the original ending of the film. So that epilogue I thought was really, really cool. So, I mean, aside from that stuff that maybe would be a little upsetting or frustrating to certain viewers, I think it was really, really amazing. Like, I think it had a really solid philosophy and some really cool themes that were going on here. Essentially, like, the contrast in spirituality between dark and light is something that I'm super fascinated with. So I'm always going to love a film that really graphically shows you the battle between angelic and demonic forces. And this did that really well. On that note, though, there was one thing that was kind of annoying to me, which was that I feel like in the fact that it had to be a genre movie and that it had to be a vampire movie, it kind of lost a little bit of its power. There was just like these moments of like vampire stuff that were kind of goofy, like the vampire stuff is not as like serious and cool as like the philosophy of music that was going into, and the spirituality and the dark versus light. And so that kind of like took a little bit away from the power that the film could have had. So that was a little bit annoying, but still I think it had a really cool solid philosophy behind it, just showing like, especially this moment where like the sun rises and all the vampires kind of like catch on fire. Like that kind of iconography is something that I'm always going to love, just showing how light casts out darkness. And so I thought that was pretty beautiful, and there was a lot of really cool, beautiful moments like that going on, especially paired with those amazing visuals and music that just absolutely knocked my socks off. It was a pretty unforgettable experience, honestly. I think my camera's about to run out of space, so I'm gonna wrap up here. I think after talking about it, there's a lot of elements that are dark and gross and unfortunate about this genre, which kind of turned me off from giving it like a full 5-star rating. But I think by the end of this discussion, I'd give it a solid 4.5 out of 5. So, I mean, pretty damn near perfect. An incredible movie, definitely meant to be experienced in theaters. It wouldn't be rated that highly, I don't think, if I was just watching it by myself on my computer. But for the experience and for the philosophy and the idea behind this movie, plus the amazing visuals and absolutely transcendent music, this is, going to be a 4.5 out of 5. One of my favorite movies of the year so far.